Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I am grateful. My macro thought starts with a piece I wrote over the weekend when I said Sub-Saharan Africa is tilted to the downside, and that was after taking account of two big flagship reports from the World Bank and from the IMF. I like this quotation: the two greatest stores of wealth internationally today is contemporary art, and I don't mean that as a joke, I mean that as a serious asset class, said Fink. And two, the other store of wealth today is apartments in Manhattan, apartments in Vancouver, in London. Home thoughts go back to Jack Kerouac. Sal, we got to go, and never stop going until we get there. Where are we going, man? I don't know, but we've got to go. On that note, I was looking through Jeet Thayil's Twitter timeline, and he'd retweeted Robert Frank's book, The Americans, remains the most influential photography book of the 20th century, and accompanying that tweet was the photograph of the road. There was nowhere to go but everywhere, so just keep on rolling under the stars. Christie's tweeted Giacometti on Pointing Man. I did that piece between midnight and 9 the next morning. And finally, we learnt that the Japanese maglev train in Japan has broken the world speed record at 590 kilometers per hour. That would take us less than an hour from Nairobi to Mombasa, which is a thought. Political Reflections: a Cairo court has sentenced former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi and 12 other defendants to 20 years in prison. Was convicted on Tuesday of ordering the arrest and torture of protesters in clashes outside the presidential palace in December 2012. The court acquitted the former president of murder charges that could have seen him face the death penalty. Morsi also faces serious charges in 3 other cases, including an accusation that he passed intelligence to Qatar. And I think it's a very existentialist thing for Sisi, a little bit like it's for Netanyahu. Put up a photograph of Morsi in his prison jail. And, I can't say I agreed with any of his policies, and I think, they were very tactical, and they rode in at a time when they saw the opening, which really wasn't created by them or for them, but it was created, when you look back at it, for them. But they fumbled it big time, and I think, I find myself thinking that the economy needs somebody like Sisi at this moment in time. However, I think Sisi, because he sees it in black and white, some of these sentences are really over the top. Fought are essentially political opponents. A file in this May 29, 2003 file photos, sailors man the rails as the USS Theodore Roosevelt comes to dock, and the Theodore Roosevelt was sent steaming towards the water off Yemen and will join other American ships prepared to intercept any Iranian vessels carrying weapons to the rebels fighting in Yemen. Badra Kumar, in an interesting piece, deconstructing Obama's Yemeni intervention, says the context is the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt and the guided missile cruiser Normandy joining 7 other US battleships in the area, including the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group, which includes a complement of more than 2,000 US Marines. However, it's all been trumped by the announcement from Saudi Arabia on Tuesday that it was halting a nearly month-old bombing campaign against a rebel group in neighboring Yemen. That's in the New York Times. I think that's a smart move, because I don't think the Saudis had much of a strategy. Putting boots on the ground would have been a recipe for a disaster. A Saudi soldier at the border with Yemen fired a mortar shell toward Houthi rebels on Tuesday. I'll put up that photograph. Leaders from Asia and Africa posed for a group photo before the start of the Asian African Conference in Jakarta. Indonesia invited heads of state and government from 109 Asian and African countries, but according to a conference official, 21 leaders turned up. Commentators have said shows the group is no longer relevant. And clearly it's not packed a punch like some of these other conferences have. Stagecraft ISIS video execution of Ethiopians in Libya appears fake. Once again, we see a terror motion picture which has been produced for dramatic effect, another work of deception, designed to create an emotional response within the viewer rather than a rational one. One of the most egregious elements of the staged iconoclastic ISIS video depicts giant-sized ISIS militants escorting their captives to their alleged end. And if you look at the picture, you'll see what he's talking about. This anomaly is a repeat of the same height discrepancy as seen during February's staged beheadings. It took me back to something I quoted in an article I wrote in September 2012 when I said when I quoted the US Army War College Quarterly of 1997, which said one of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. Now, set these events alongside those comments from the US Army College Quarterly in 1997. One of the defining bifurcations of the future will be the conflict between information masters and information victims. Information warfare will not be couched in the rationale of geopolitics, but will be spawned, like any Hollywood drama, out of raw emotions, hatred, jealousy and greed, emotions rather than strategy, that will set the terms of information warfare struggles. Currency markets, the euro was at 107.51, but then popped higher to as high as 107.80 and change. Dollar index 97.87, but that's probably slipped. Japanese yen 119.53 when I walked in, but it's a little bit lower now. Swissy 0.9538, pound 149, touched 150 just now. But when I walked in the morning, 149.45. Aussie very strong, 0.7773. India rupee 62.895. South Korean won 1079.77. The high yield is the Canadian, the Aussie, the pound have all bounced higher than they were a couple of weeks ago. Rial 303.43, Egyptian pound 762.90, and the rand 1213.44. Dollar index, my target is 110. I'll put up a 3-month chart. We're now around the 97.87 level. Euro dollar, I think we're going to parity, then to 0.93. I'll put up a 3-month chart. Interestingly, the Euro interbank offered rate, or Euribor, has now dropped to minus 0.001% on Tuesday, according to data from the European Money Markets Institute. First negative reading since Bloomberg started collecting the data at the end of 1998. Joseph Weisenthal tweeted this image of Greek debt to GDP hits an all-time high of 177.1%. We went to Zuma in Dubai, but they've opened one, it seems, in Midtown, New York, and this is the gleaming club-like entrance to Zuma in Midtown via Bloomberg, and it's very good food, I must say. Gold, when I came in, was at 1203.325. It's back below 1200. I'll put up a 3-month chart. I see it rolling over from here. Crude oil looks as if there's a near-term top, now trading at $55.90. Look at this 1-month chart, you'll see what I mean. Sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa deploys its army to curb attacks against immigrants, sending the army to townships around Johannesburg and Durban in the first deployment to quell civilian unrest since 2008 after attacks against immigrants left at least 7 people dead. We will deploy troops to volatile areas, Defense Minister said in televised comments to reporters during a visit to Alexandra Township in Johannesburg on Tuesday. We are deploying because it is an emergency. The army will support police officers who will take the lead in containing the violence. It may be a belated effort to demonstrate, especially to other governments in Africa and people in South Africa, that they are willing to make the hard decision to try and get to grips with what is happening. Roland Henwood, a politics lecturer at the University of Pretoria, Maybe they have information that this is out of the control of the police, so they have to act with much more vigour. South African all-share up 10.09% year to date, and just shy of a record high. The index is above 54,000 as of this morning. Dollar Rand 1207.49, put up a 6-month chart. Still think we're in a wide range, 1165, 1265. Egyptian pound is at 763.20. The Egyptian EGX 30 is down 2.99% year to date. Nigeria all shares up 2.16% year to date, and has rallied more than 25% since February the 13th. The Ghana Stock Exchange down 0.38% year to date. Burundi warns army could be called out over protests. 5 opposition parties, as well as splinter groups of the ruling CNDD-FDD, who oppose Nkurunziza, have launched a campaign calling for the president not to run again. This is a refrain that's been to be heard across a lot of Africa, because there are lots of countries where presidential candidates are at the end of their mandated term and they're trying to extend it. DRC, there was a considerable furore and the president seemingly backed down for now. I like these 2 photographs. History heroes, women in front of the Afro Negro Club in Kinshasa, Congo, 1965. And then Margot Kaiser tweeted on March the 14th, Juba, South Sudan. And that looks very murky and fast moving, with a lot of talk that both the principals might be on their way out and a third way being found. Kenya. Events in Mauritius are being felt here. Police raids, court drama over Britain man's Ponzi troubles. A Mauritius court issued an international arrest warrant on Monday afternoon for a Britam director wanted for fraud, money laundering and embezzlement. Magistrate Alwyn Joy Paul, sitting in Port Louis District Court, acceded to a new request by police to order the arrest of Mr. Dawood Ajum Rawat. Local media outlets Le Matinal and L'Express reported. Mr. Rawat is the single biggest shareholder at Britam. On Friday, another court presented with a similar request refused to issue an arrest warrant and also rejected 3 of 5 provisional charges lined up against Mr. Rawat. The other 2 charges were dropped by police because they were defective. The CCID told the court they needed to interrogate Mr. Rawat over alleged crimes that led to the state takeover of Brahma Banking Corporation Limited, following claims that evidence of a massive Ponzi scheme involving up to about $750 million had been unearthed. Brahma Banking's license was revoked, business taken over by a new state-owned entity called the National Commercial Bank. According to the provisional charges that have been filed in court, Mr. Rawat was accused of, among other things, being involved in a criminal conspiracy with others to defraud policyholders and investors by transferring 6 billion rupees to personal accounts held by himself and close relatives. Money laundering by instructing directors and officers of Brahma Bank and BI Mauritius to transfer the 6 billion rupees, criminally engaging in transactions that involve property which in part directly and indirectly represents the proceeds of a crime. On this basis, the police sought a provisional warrant of arrest for the billionaire businessman, who they described as the ultimate beneficiary of the fraudulent transactions. Britam is down about more than 20%, was limit down yesterday, and it's trading limit down again today. The link for Britam is, if you scroll down on Rich Wrap-Ups, you'll find it, an analysis of the results. And the big issue is going to be if Mr. Rawat is forced to divest 20% of his shares in Britam. You can imagine this might present itself as an opportunity for a private equity player or somebody. Kenya shilling 93.746. Nairobi all share up 6.624% so far this year, and in stark contrast to the NAC 20, which is down 0.2346%, and that's all about the outperformance of the big caps like Safaricom, KCB and others. And if you need to check any listed share, there's a link at the bottom of Rich Wrap-Ups for you to do just that. Once again, thank you kindly for stopping by. I remain very grateful.